Here's why I quit my dream job to pursue more money. Now, that's usually the opposite narrative that we're told. We're usually told that you don't need to work a 9 to 5 job, you don't need to work for someone else, you can quit all that and follow your passions and pursue that. Now, I did that. I actually started off in my career doing something I loved. A little bit about me. When I left high school, I was fortunate enough to work a job. It was just a normal labour job. I did it for about 6 months. And that was my first experience of doing something that I wasn't necessarily passionate about. Once I realised I wasn't passionate about that, I left the country. I left Australia and I went to Thailand. And I trained Muay Thai full time. I competed and I did martial arts as my passion. When I was young, I considered this to be my apprenticeship. When I came back from Thailand 2.5 years later, I became a full-time martial arts coach. Now you've got to be thinking, wow, how lucky are you, Jake, to be doing something that you're super passionate about as a full-time career? And I was super lucky. I loved my job, but I wasn't making a lot of money. Now, at the time, I was young and I didn't need a lot of money, so it worked for me really, really well. But as I started to get older, I started to get into a relationship I really cared about, and I wanted to become more of a man and a provider. And martial arts just wasn't cutting it. I had to start doing Uber Eats just to supplement my income and make it a little bit more affordable to provide somewhat more of a quality of life for my family. Now, at the time, I just had a girlfriend, but it was kind of embarrassing. Yeah, I did something I loved, but I wasn't able to buy the things, and not necessarily things that I wanted to buy, but produce a lifestyle that I knew that we both deserved and we were heading towards. Now, I knew I wanted to marry this girl, and I knew in the future we would have to get married, or we wouldn't have to, that I wanted to, and kids were definitely projected down the line. Fast forward a little bit, we were going to take the next step and we wanted to buy our house. Now in Australia, housing is quite expensive and we needed to get a loan. And with my current job, I was still a casual. I was doing coaching and I was doing Ubers, but nothing was sustainable. Nothing was guaranteed income. So that was the first decision I made to leave one of my dream jobs to something else. Now at the time, I was still hyper-focused on doing something I was passionate about. I left martial arts coaching into a role that was arguably even better. I went into an activity instructor. So what I was doing, no joke, I was getting paid to do is run activities like mountain biking, mountain climbing, kayaking. It was awesome. Abseiling, it was incredible. Even did a little bit of maintenance and I would drive around this facility. So it was in the bush up in the Australian hillside, and I was driving like a little Polaris, a little like 4-wheel kind of maintenance vehicle around, just doing maintenance change. There was a dam, there was hills, views, wildlife. It was incredible, and I had to kind of like, pinch myself every now and then to realize that this was actually a job that I was getting paid to do. But one thing was, it was a pretty low income. It was pretty much the same with what I was getting when I was coaching and doing Uber full time, but it was a permanent position. So I was able to get the house, and fortunately we got something that was well within our means. But knowing this, I still wanted to progress my future. I still wanted to grow a family, and I wanted to be a provider. Now, something happened. I was working for this job, and out of the blue, I got made redundant. And I realized that I had this job that I really loved and was super passionate, but it came to an end. I got told that you have to leave within 4 weeks, and because I wasn't there, this was at 11.5 months, but because I got that notice then, I wasn't getting any type of payout. So that was when it hit me. I was either going to go back to something I knew, which was coaching, which wasn't going to maintain the quality of life that I wanted to step towards, or I was going to have to put my big boy pants on and get a job that was higher paying. This was the first step I made to get what I would consider in Australia to be a middle waged role. Okay, so this is about, yeah, what I'd say is standard, average, maybe like medium income. And I realized that it wasn't something, it was still aligned with my passion. It was in the recreation field, but not in the context where I'd normally do it. So it was a little bit of passion. It was kind of like I was still holding on to wanting to do something I loved, but I was heading into more of a income focused role. And what happened was I realized that this was going to give me the ability to set up a financial foundation for my family, and this was more important than doing something I loved for me. Now, keep in mind, I was still relatively young, in my mid-20s, and hadn't had kids yet. So I knew that I was able to make sacrifices now, so I probably wouldn't have to later. Now, if you've been working a 9-to-5 job that you absolutely hate now, you've been doing it for over a decade, and you're in your late 30s, and you've built that financial foundation, yeah, if you can afford to financially and you've got that base, go do something you're passionate about and give it a go. But I wasn't at that stage. I did it the opposite. Because I hadn't really set up a base early, I was kind of at a position where I need to start to get that ball rolling. What we were really fortunate about was we were used to a very low, like a low expense day to day. So we weren't spending a lot of money because we were used to having a lower income to begin with. And then from this role, I took an even higher paying role, and I would say this is about a medium to high role, mainly medium, but there was a lot of potential for overtime. And what I did, I went full on head first into that. I worked as many overtime shifts as I could for a year. And yeah, I wasn't teaching martial arts, and I wasn't doing kayaking, and I wasn't doing all this cool adventure stuff that you'd brag at someone at a dinner party that, hey, this is what I do for a living. But I was able to put things in place that I don't regret. So this was at a stage where I knew we were getting married. This was the marriage that I had already proposed. We were planning the wedding, and we were planning on starting a family. Now, there was a little bit of dad anxiety. You know, I'm about to, bring a child into this world. I'm about to become a husband, and I want to be a provider. I want to be able to give the things my family deserve. Now, it's not saying I want a big expensive car or a mansion of a house. I just want the basics, plus a little bit of things that are more aligned with our values. So I want to be able to, take my family on holidays. I want to not stress about bills. I want to do all these things. So what I did, I went head first. I did as many overtime shifts as I possibly could do. I actually got to the point where, yeah, I burnt out. But I don't regret it. If I was to do it again, I would do it earlier. I would have done it when I was early 20s, so I had more energy to put in for these overtime. Now, because I've made those sacrifices, I have that unshakable financial foundation for my family, where I can now decide if I want to take a role with less money that's more aligned with my passion. And I've realized that's not necessarily what I'm going to do. I want to stay in this stable work, stable income, stable employment where I know I'm not going to be made redundant because it's not a more passion-based employment that kind of can take advantage of the employees. It's a stable job, and I'm going to use it for at least another 3 to 5 years to make sure that that base isn't going to crumble if I was to decide to do something I'm more passionate about in the future. Now, the reason why I gave up the passion isn't because of the money. It's because of the freedom that comes with it. Now I'm a dad, alright? And I've got a dependent. I've got a little baby boy that I'm going to be an example for. And I don't want him watching me work forever in a job I hate. So I've done it before he's able to observe. Right? I've made those sacrifices early. Now I'm not saying To those people who see in the caption that I gave up my dream job, I'm not saying that you should give up a dream job. I'm saying that you should make the sacrifices that maybe the dream job can't, or make the sacrifices that give you the ability to build a nice financial base that maybe that dream job can't give you to begin with. And that's what I found myself. Now you might be, your dream job might be in tech and it might set up your financial, right? But my dream job was in martial arts and it doesn't pay a lot. And if I was wanting to make more money, I would have to open up a gym, take a business loan, and I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to be as debt-free as possible in my financial journey. But because I made those sacrifices, I have so much less anxiety about money, I'm not stressing, and now I'm able to think about, dropping the overtime because I don't need it anymore. And yeah, that's why I left my dream job. Now, would I go back to teaching martial arts in the future? Maybe. I might, but I think, I'm going to stay in a role that I know is secure for, that 3 to 5 years. And, now I have time to do something like this, create some content, have some fun, building maybe like a personal brand and building multiple streams of income across different areas to really take away the financial stress of being stuck to one job completely. So that's why I left my dream job and I pursued more money. Now, I wouldn't recommend if you're later in life or if you've got a lot of commitments with the family, but if you're early, if you're thinking about kids, if your kids are still young, to the point of they're not in their toddler stage and they're still baby, I don't regret smashing that overtime. Obviously, if it's not gonna get in the way of your connection with your wife and that postpartum stage, you've got to be as present as possible in there for them, physically, emotionally. But if you're in the stage where you're planning on having kids, I would recommend to do as much work and build the finances as much as you can so you're not stressed. Now, I hope you enjoyed my take. It's not the normal narrative you hear. You normally hear it the other way around, and that's just my personal experience. So I hope you've enjoyed, and now I'm actually on the journey to revert it and go back to something I'm more passionate about. But I wouldn't have the opportunity to do that if I didn't drop my dream job to begin with and chase that more money. Now, if you enjoyed, like and subscribe and follow the channel, and also check me out on Instagram and other social medias at Jake Newton's Law. Cheers.